Welcome, welcome. Jamie Hernandez here, founder of Breakthrough Yoga Coaching Method, helping you bridge the gap between your spiritual practice and your business so that you can grow emotionally and financially. So today's training is titled Stepping into Your Calling, the truth about stepping into your calling. So if you're here live, hashtag live. If you're here for the replay, hashtag replay, because I promise I'm going to answer all your questions. If you comment down below or while we're live, if I happen to get it in real time. Sometimes it doesn't go real time. So stepping into your calling, I think one of the first things as spiritual entrepreneurs we need to understand is that it is not this big, miraculous moment. Stepping into your calling is something that you intuitively always had the hint, the kind of knowing, the experience in yourself, especially since you were younger. There's something that you've always known. There's something that you've always seen yourself doing. And so the big miraculous insight, sometimes we mistakenly we continue to go on this sort of like seeking journey, which is totally cool. Like, I think all spiritual entrepreneurs, that's what we love to do. But we're seeking in a way that is like, okay, maybe this is going to be the certification. Maybe this is going to be the training. Maybe this is going to be the moment. Maybe this is going to be the one retreat that kind of clears my soul and my mind. And I'm not saying that we don't have these deep experiences, but our calling is something we've always known, and those certifications and those retreats are actually to support what we've always known. So if you are attracted to music or dancing or art therapy or energy work or something, right, then most likely the retreats, the healing, the certifications, what you take in school, your hobbies are going to support the calling that you've always heard. And I always talk about intuition as being something that you've always known. So it's remembering the future and remembering the future differently based on what you've known and remembering the past. If I give you an example, it's like I do a lot of somatic work. I do a lot of movement, yoga, energy work. And I still remember myself dancing in front of my mirror, not for performance. Hey, Allison, not for performance sake, but there's something in me that I just like to move around in my room. So I'm sure for you, let me know in the comments, what was that thing that you've always done? The thing that you've always done, the thing that you are always attracted to. And here's the thing with our calling, it's usually like right in front of us. So, point number one, it's not this big miraculous insight. Yes, we might get big miraculous shifts and movements and releasing and awakenings into our calling, but we've always known what that is. So I guess what I'm trying to say is like, you can stop the seeking and the searching because you know what that is, right? And even though you don't know exactly how it's going to look or how much money it's going to make and all that, the important thing is that you start to allow yourself to step towards that in small baby steps. Step towards those things that you're naturally attracted to, right? And take action based on that. But then step number two is to understand that as you step towards your calling, it's going to, the more you step into your calling, the more it's going to kind of reveal the next obvious action. And again, it's not this big miraculous thing. It's not this guru that's going to tell you. It's you, right? And so what's really important is that we have our ability and we fine-tune our ability to listen to listen to just these small ideas that are not going to sound logical, they're not going to sound practical, they are ideas that are like, oh, wouldn't this be cool? I would just love that. And then your logical mind goes and it's like, oh, well, no, yeah, that's not convenient. I'm going to have to take 3 weeks off, and then I have to, buy this, blah, blah, blah. Like, so understand that the way that your intuition works is through these very small moments when we feel a little bit more relaxed and we don't necessarily feel like there's a threat. And that could be something very basic and simple, like, and again, everyone's different, but maybe you're just taking a shower, maybe you're just cleaning your floor, like a place where you're like, okay, I'm cool, I don't have to like ponder the deep thoughts of my life. But it's in those moments, or if you have a kind of meditation practice or a dance practice or even biking or just something where your mind is not hyper focused on trying to solve some kind of problem, then there are these moments where it's like you're going to have these little moments that like, ooh, wouldn't that be cool? And the practice is to start to listen to those moments and start to hear the reoccurring pattern. Because here's the thing, we can have lots of ideas. Especially if we're creative, we can be, whoa, wouldn't it be cool to do this? And whoa, wouldn't it be cool to do that? But the thing about our calling is it's sort of like a reoccurring theme. Yeah, so let me know in the comments, like, I have so many clients and they're like, I've always known I need to speak in front of people. I've always known that, like, art therapy was my thing. I've always known that energy was my thing. I always known I'm really good in business. Like, I've always known, like, I can help people with post-traumatic stress, in the military. Like, there are things that you kind of always known, and you, again, the steps that you take in your life continue to create the knowing that you've always known. If you're continuing to listen to those creative moments, to those creative insights, to those hits of intuition, and you kind of follow them. And I'm not saying we're going to be perfectly perfect at following our intuition, and I'm also not saying that the intuition is always like bang on, but if you start to hear the reoccurring theme, you're going to hear it. And it's always listening to just like, well, what's the next thing? And sometimes it's so friggin' simple, like, oh, maybe I just need to buy a piece of paper and write these ideas down. Oh, maybe I need to, like, take that art class that I've always wanted to take. Oh, maybe I want to take that training or read that book, right? Because here's the other thing about, stepping into your calling is the hit comes there, the wisdom comes, right? But then so does the work and the commitment. Okay, so once you hear the calling, the truth of the matter is our calling is always going to be like, what do you mean? No, I can't do that. Like, huh? No, no, like, this is crazy talk. Like, and nobody is hearing it other than you. That's the thing. And that's the most challenging thing about our calling, is that you're the only one that receives it. Yes, you will be validated externally and you will be unvalidated. That's the other thing too. It's like some people who are your deep people who see you will be like, yes, do it. Oh my God, that sounds amazing. And if people who, they don't get it, they'll be like, whoa, I don't know. Well, that's kind of like, isn't that impractical? Like, don't you have to do this? And so understand that in the end, it's really only you that's going to hear it. And I think that's probably the biggest challenge as human beings, is to understand that we are on our soul's journey alone, or on our own, but never alone. So what's important is to understand that, okay, so now that I hear the calling and I have the maturity to understand that it takes work. And again, we have free will on here on earth. So whether you listen to the calling or not is your choice. But the thing about that is that the soul is always going to beckon you. So, you can do whatever the heck you want here on earth. Whatever you want. You can become a robber. You can do whatever you want, right? But the soul will always beckon you. So those who are spiritual seekers will often continue to learn how to hear that voice louder and louder and louder until it's like, you know, knocking you down. And I think sometimes that's what happens. It's just like this little whisper, and then it's like this loud knock, and then all of a sudden you get like hit with something that maybe you get sick or you get into accident or something like that, where life is just like kind of redirecting you based on your deeper prayers, right? So if there is your external world where you're like, this is more practical, I'll just do it this way, but your deeper desires, like, I really know I want this, right? And those two are constantly conflicting, then life is still going to hear, even though you externally are not executing, your life is still going to hear your deeper prayer. So that's how I kind of would explain, you know, that thing, that thing that kind of, that life pushes us. It's going to listen to our deeper desires. So we hear the calling. We don't always have the courage. We never do actually have the courage in that moment to say, oh yes, that's where I'm going to go for. Unless you're like young and you are moving through life and you sort of are still moving from that intuition. But at a certain point, sometimes what happens is when we move towards our intuition and then we have some what we call failures, then we hold that and we carry that forth every single year. And we allow that to hold us back. So here's why we have to discern between when we are in survival and when we are in soul mode, when the soul is speaking. And here's the thing, they speak like right beside each other. You know, the soul will be like, whoa, yeah, cool, yes, do that. And then all of a sudden, bang, your egoic structure is going to like, well, that's just not possible because of, and then you start going into a problem-solving mode. And so that egoic structure is going to do anything it possibly can to protect you from the unknown. And of course, if you're going for a soul mission, of course it's an unknown, right? There's nothing known about it other than you know it in your deep heart, and you know it naturally puts you in flow state and your zone of genius. Okay? But your survival will protect you at all costs. So what's really important is to understand and discern between the two voices, and especially when they're always kind of dancing and having this simultaneous conversation. Like, you know, I was with a client the other day, and he was talking, because here's the thing, when we feel safe, the soul will speak, and so will our survival. So often in our coaching, what happens is like all of the like, oh, I can't do this and you can't do that, blah blah blah, and then we do some practices to kind of shift out of survival mode into soul mode. And then all of a sudden, it's like, okay, so tell me, like, you know, tell me what it is you want to do, right? And like, oh, I would really love to work with these people and teach them energy work and teach them the 3 stages of this and all, like, you know, and then it just starts flowing out, right? And so there are two voices, and I had a client where he literally was telling me, while he was telling me, his egoic structure was literally like speaking to him at the same time. So he was telling me about what he would love to do, and I could literally see it in his body. He was kind of like almost going like this, and I said, what's that voice up there? And he's like, yeah, I can't, like, you know, yeah, there's a voice like literally here telling me like every word I say that I want to do, it's like, well, no, you can't do that. It's almost like bearing down on him, right? So if you were to work with me, like, that's one of the biggest works that we start to practice with, is starting to really discern the difference between survival mode and soul mode. And then practicing collaborating with our survival mode, because our survival mode is always going to be there. Fear is always going to be there. So it's not like we do these work and we do all of this stuff and all of a sudden we're so confident. No, the fear is always going to be there. So we have to learn how to collaborate with that one that is always trying to keep us safe. And then 2, learn how to trust the soul's voice, right? And take action based on what the soul is yearning, okay? And not these big, huge actions, like just what is the next most obvious action? And again, for us, it would always be what is the next most obvious action for you energetically, but also for you on a practical level, okay? So very often with my clients who have been at this thing, transformation, coaching, healing for decades. So they're phenomenal at what they do. Like they get them in the room with their ideal person, and they do their magic. Okay, you know that about yourself. And so sometimes, often, especially for healers, like one of the biggest kind of a lot of energy that we have around is increasing our prices and money, right? So but yet you've been working with people for like decades, and one of the easiest things is to start working with the people who already trust you, right? And of course there's a strategy to this, but developing packages that create your life altering transformation and positioning it and offering it to people that you already know that trust you, right? So, sometimes strategy is much more simple than you think. But again, it's that ability to, what is the next most obvious thing that you can do, that your nervous system can handle to move you to where you want to go. Because here's the thing, very often what we'll do is we know where we want to go, or we want to maybe, let's say, make more money, or we have created a certain program that is positioned in a way that creates an outcome, so that people are paying for the outcome, not your hourly rate. Okay, that's something that I teach our clients. And the simplest thing is like, okay, go call your client that you've known for 20 years, right? And then what they'll do is like, well, no, Mel, maybe I should go on this retreat, and maybe I should go take a certification, and then maybe I should like read these 10 books before I talk to like that one client that has known me for 20 years, and we've done transformational work, like, and the stuff we do works. Yeah. So, as healers and coaches, we have to understand how to position ourselves so that people understand, like, what is the life-altering transformation that we offer. Okay, so it is learning how to take the next most obvious action, and in business, I would say the next most profitable action. Because you can do a lot of things in business. You can try to create a website and do this and do that and try to create 1 million followers on YouTube. And it's like, okay, yeah, that's going to happen like in 10 years or whatever, or never. But you have like 20 people that you've been working with for like at least 5 years or 10 years or even 20 years or even 30 years, like that you can offer your services to, right? Just like a consultant who's been working in the field for a long time will offer, a higher rate package, right? You know this. Logically, you know this, right? Like when you're hiring somebody, like a contractor, and you're like, okay, that guy's 5K, that guy's 10K, that guy's 30K. Usually it's because they have a certain expertise. And same with you, right? You didn't just come, straight off the, out of school to like, but we're consciously kind of thinking that we are. Every time we take a certification, we're like, oh, I don't know it enough. But it's like, you've been working with how many people for how long, right? So your expertise and the value of what you do has increased. Okay? So it's understanding the next obvious action and just starting to kind of recognize that you've been stepping into your calling since you stepped onto this earth, and you've been developing that, right? Slowly but surely. And your own personal experience, your client experience, and your professional experience has created such a synergy where whatever you offer is unique to you. There may be 1 million meditation teachers, but And you know this, or dance teachers or art teachers, but you know you work with that one that specializes in that thing, right? So as a healer, that's kind of, you know, that's what you're going to have to start to recognize. And again, we in marketing, we call it like these names like finding your niche and all that, and we get all caught up in that, but like it's just obvious sometimes. There are certain people that are attracted to you. There are certain trainings that you are attracted to. There are certain life experiences that has brought you from A to B. You have brought your clients from A to B. Your trainings have brought you from A to B. Okay? So that culmination starts to give you a hint of, you know, who it is that you work with, right? And usually when we're stepping into our calling, it's the reason why I'm talking about who you work with as a healer or as a coach is because our calling is usually involving other people. It's not just our own solo journey, right? Yes, we are on our solo journey often, but we're sharing it with the world. Yeah? And that version of how you want to share it with the world is up to you, right? Like I think last year I came back from a retreat and I was like, oh my God, I want to do a retreat now. And then I was starting to think of all the components. I'm like, whoa, there's many things that I'm at level 0, meaning to say like, this is new, this is new, this is new, this is new, this is new. Ooh, wait a minute. Okay, maybe my next obvious action is to actually just offer what I want to offer on a consistent, regular basis so that the actual retreat itself becomes more clear and I develop more momentum around the actual teaching, right? And then it won't be so hard to figure out like all of the other stuff and get help. So here's the other thing. Once you hear the calling and understand there's work and commitment, right? That's the maturity of building anything. You build a house and you understand, well, it's going to be work. There's going to be a vision. There's going to be a commitment. Like you can't just start digging a hole in the ground and the foundation and you're like, oh, wow, day 30, this is hard. And then you stop. Like if the house is going to be built, you sort of have to go through the work and stay committed, you know, and it's same with our calling. And you know, sometimes we'll fall off the bandwagon and that's fine, or off the wagon, whatever you call it. And here's the thing, here's another point, understand your zone of genius based on your I call it the triangle of 3, your professional experience, your personal experience, and your client experience. And what was I going to say? And understand, yes, your zone of genius and the things that you are not, that is not your zone of genius. Sometimes you have your zone of excellence, which kind of looks very, and a lot of healers do this. They stay in their zone of excellence, thinking like that's the thing, but it's never quite satisfying. Okay? And then there's a zone of incompetence where you're just like, for me, I'm like, oh, I am not the expert at retreat making, but I do know some really good masters at that. So understanding where you need help in creating this vision, because we all know when you create a dream, it doesn't just happen. Like you just don't do it by yourself. If you're going to create a house, how big of a team do you need? You know, there are experts in the foundation, there's experts in the brick making, there's expert in the windows, there's expert in the electricity, there's expert in the interior design, architect, like, right? And if you're an entrepreneur and you're building a life, the growth, your growth needs to be supported by other people's zone of genius. So you're the visionary, you see the calling, but you also know where is your zone of genius and where other zone of genius. So having the courage to reach out to people, right, that may know a little more. And again, not from a place where you're like, oh, I'm just so dumb, I don't know anything kind of thing, but like, oh, I want this to happen, I want to build this house, so I better get on the call with a brick maker today, or like whatever you call it, or I better like call the architect, right? Instead of thinking, well, what if I try to YouTube it and DIY the architecture? Like, no, you're not gonna, that's not gonna, right? And I think as spiritual entrepreneurs, sometimes we do that. We're like, okay, yeah, I'm gonna just become this YouTube expert. Like, no. Yes, you can research, but then at a certain point, like when you are researching something, you research it, but at a certain point, you have to pick like contractor A, B, or C. You're not going to be the contractor. Does that make sense? And I think as healers and coaches, we somehow think like we are going to just do it all. Like, no. Right? So know where you can get help. And there's always people who are way ahead of you, people who are like at the same sort of stage as you, and people who are, a little bit behind you. So all of those people can help you, right? Like I really hate editing and video stuff, where my teammate Katie, she loves it. She loves like editing like the videos and all that stuff, and I hate it, right? That's my zone of incompetence. So she's going to help me with that. And my coach, who's like, earning multi-million dollars, and my other coach who is like living her dream in South America, like they're going to help me recognize and like that bigger dream, right, that I have, that vision that is the unknown, right? And then my colleagues who are like doing similar things than me, I'm going to lean on them for like, hey, how'd you do that? Well, how much do you charge for that? Well, how do you rent this studio? Like, okay, so understand you always have help, and you have help with people, but from a spiritual level. And here's the thing, one of the things that we practice is learning how to, I practiced this last week, clearing the noise. I did a whole training on it so that we can hear our guidance and understand that that guidance comes from your soul, but sometimes it comes from your ancestors, sometimes it comes from your spirit guides, sometimes it comes from, people who have passed. So you're on your own, but you're not alone. So it's important to understand as you step into your calling to have and create a support system to support you. Yeah. Okay. Let me look at my notes. I want to see what else I have to say about this. Let me know in the comments if you have any big takeaways, any insights, any other things you want to add to what I'm saying, those of you who are following your deep desires or calling. Here's a mindset thing that I think many of us who are, working hard, doing the thing to make our life happen, is a mindset shift that we can start to really recognize is that we don't have to do this. But guess what? We get to. We have to understand our privilege position here. When you are a creative and you build a life around your own personal creation, that is not available to all of the world. People are dying, people are in survival mode, people are in certain situations where listening to their calling is just a dream, and it will always be a dream for the rest of their life. So I think if we start to understand, wow, I get to wake up and create my life, and I have the means, I have the energy, I have the body, I have the mind, I have the experience, I have the network, I have the resources, I am resourceful, and I get to create the canvas of my life. I get to do this. I don't have to. Nobody has to do anything. You don't have to do anything, right? But you do have the privilege of trying, and not everyone has that privilege. So I think when we come from that frequency of appreciation and that excitement, and they're like, whoa, I get to do this? How fun. I just talk into a camera, like, while I'm sitting in my back porch. It's pretty cool. Like, and speak about ideas that are touching my own soul so they can help other people. Yeah, it's pretty cool, right? And so that frequency is your longevity, because longevity is held by higher vibration. We are no doubt going to have pain in our life, grief, sadness, loss, heartache, illness, you know, that is part of life. So if we understand that we need to hold a frequency or practice a frequency to hold our deep, our deep pains, right? Then it creates longevity. Because if we were to quantify and only spend like 80% in our, what's painful in our life, it's not sustainable. And it's not denying that we don't have pain, but it's understanding, well, how can I carry this so that I can live my life and help, the people that I help, right? And again, that will look different for everyone. Okay, so don't base it on what you see out there. Like, base it on, like, I just want to help one client a week. Like, if that's what you want to do, great, cool. Like, so get out of like, oh yeah, but this person and that person. It's just like, that's your ego just kind of like almost making an excuse of not doing what you're doing, and why you want to do it, right? And maybe you're in a very privileged situation where you can even do stuff for free. And, like, this is what I do every week. I do this for free because I have the time, I have the means, I have the availability, I have the equipment, I have the energy, I have the mind, right? I have the spirit, the calling, right? So whatever your dream is, and this comes back to that clearing the noise, like, what it is. So we need to take the next obvious actions. Okay, I'm going to recap soon, but I just want to make sure that I covered everything I want to say today. There's so much. This is like a never-ending, never-ending topic. Oh, okay, this is one thing I want to say. When we start to hear the calling, I think this is key, actually. We actually have to develop a new identity. And this because, like, let's say, for example, when you had your first job, right? Like, I remember I had my first sales job. I was 15 years old. So my new identity is like, ooh, I'm one of those ladies that sell clothes. Ooh, okay, so I have to wear a dress. I have to speak a certain way. I have to be on time. So I had like this fancy watch, And so in order for me to do that job, I needed to step into a new identity. Yes, I was still myself. I was still talkative. I still really like to be nerdy about the products I'm selling. But we have to step into a new identity. And one way to work with this is, once we hear our calling and we envision that higher version of ourselves, or whatever that version of ourselves, right? That more fulfilled version of ourselves that we're constantly evolving into. Okay, doesn't mean that this version there's something wrong with it, but we as human beings are constantly wanting to evolve. We can ask ourselves, well, what would my new identity decide today, right? Because what happens when you start to allow yourself to step into your calling and understanding, well, that requires a new identity, which that identity, they make different decisions, right? So when I wanted to really fully step into my entrepreneurship, my decision to, for example, hire my coach was based on that new identity. Because my old identity would be like, whoa, oh my gosh, like, that's a lot of money. Blah, blah, blah. But my new identity is like, well, if I'm going to do this like entrepreneur coaching online thing, like, I don't know about it. I got to find a professional that does, right? So my decision was based on my new identity. And that identity is going to take risks, right? And why do we call it risks? This is because it's something that we've never done before. That's all it is. It's not because it's it's risk because, oh, it's so dangerous risk. Yes, we have dangerous risk taking, but most likely when you're stepping into your calling, the risk is more like, oh, I don't know. I don't know if this is fully gonna work. And I think this is gonna be my last point. My last point is, okay, so just a last point on the identity thing is, the other thing that you can start to ask yourself, if my new identity knew I couldn't fail, what decision would it make? Because we have to understand, I've talked about this before, like when we step into our calling, we're going to be failing forward, and we're going to have to take many attempts failing. Failing is just another stepping stone to going towards where you want to go. And people who succeed and finally get to the outcome is because, one, they don't quit, and two, they're willing to take risks, which is taking things into the unknown and failing forward, to have more attempts, right? Have you ever seen somebody who, I don't know, like I'm just thinking of a random example of a child trying to do something like a cartwheel or something like that. The only reason why they get it is because they fell, and then they fell a lot, and then they fell, and then they asked a friend how to do it, and then they watched maybe YouTube, and then they took a class, and then they just kept doing it. Like, that's what I'm thinking. My daughter, she literally would do it over and over and over and over again until she finally got it, because she unconsciously knew, and she didn't have a relationship to failure, and she just freaking did the thing and fell and fell and fell and fell until, like, oh, she kind of got it, and then she kind of got it, and she kind of got it, and then some of her friends helped her, and then she got it, right? It's the same thing. So we have to develop that maturity as an entrepreneur, and not be like that 14-year-old, like, well, I did the one thing and it didn't work. Right? Like, kind of like the building the house analogy, right? I dig the hole, but that was too tiring, so I'm gonna quit. Like, and that's like our 14-year-old self, right? So, so the new identity, I would say, is probably like the thing that I just said there is probably like the key to all of this. So, let's recap. What the heck did I say today? It's not gonna be a big miraculous moment, right? When you step into your calling, no, it's these small, like, you want to step into a stage, or you're speaking to 1,000. Well, you know, the first step is maybe one person, then two, and then three, and then five, and then you're in a church basement, you're in your house, and then a church basement, and then outside, and then, like, you know, like, there's no big miraculous moment where you're finally made it. It's these small, consistent, congruent actions based on what you've always known to be true, what you've always been drawn to, and that's always been there. And you know it based on your personal experience, your professional experience, and your personal experience. Okay? So, no amount of healing and certifications or money or that is going to be the thing. The thing is, you heard the calling. Your egoic mind is going to be afraid. So we know this already. There's going to be work, and we need to commit. So the second point I talked about, well, I don't know what point was this, but anyway, it was understanding and discerning. And I talk about this a lot, between your survival voice and your soul's voice. And that's a big thing that we kind of help collaborate with in our program, is how to work with that constant resistance to what you want, that constant fear, because it will always be there, right? And it's a constant practice, right, of collaborating with it, and also having a safe place for, like, your dreams. You know, like, us in the healing industry, we kind of know that, like, we're really good at going into deep, dark spaces. But guess what? We also need to have room for our soul to, like, shout from the rooftops, and have a safe place and people who can see that and can see it in you. This is important, okay? Because yes, it is in you, and you're the only one that knows that truth, but you need mirrors, right? to reflect back. And it's so funny because in our coaching sessions, I often reflect back, like, do you remember when your soul said da 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 da? And then it's almost like sometimes it's like a dream. Like, oh, really? Oh, you know? And so it's important to have somebody who can hold you accountable for what your soul is beckoning. So, you can't just do it alone. So that's another point, is to understand your zone of genius, own it, claim it, right? But also understand other people's zone of genius, who can help you along this journey, right? On a spiritual level, like all of your guides, but also on a very practical level, If you know you have to do electricity in your house, you're not going to freaking try to do it yourself. Like, unless you're one of those, some people are just really good at figuring some things out, right? But if you're not that person, like, don't start to go and try to take a course on something. Like, I'm going to take electrician course now so I can get to, and it's that thing where I'm like, let me do all of this certification, this and that to get to this. When really, like I said, one of the examples is just go freaking call your client tomorrow, But of course, we work on that. Sometimes it takes some time to get to that point. And again, it takes strategy. It's like, how do we position ourselves? How do we own our own value? How do we actually market that value, right? How do we understand, like, my decades of experience actually has increased, right? Just like anybody with more experience, their value has increased, right? We know that. So it's shifting our relationship to how we run our business. Like, we cannot run our business on tools we know we need and we don't have, right? Okay, and one of those tools is money. So I think in the healing coaching space, and just humans in general, North Americans in general, we have a weird relationship with money. So we can start to look at that concept of receiving and utilizing a tool that can fulfill our dreams, but not just our dreams, but our personal dreams, our entrepreneurial dreams, like all of it. It's just a tool, right? Okay. What else did I say? We said a lot today. And I think the last thing I said, and I think it's probably key. Okay, I talked about the mistake of trying to take all of these healing stuff. I talked about listening, but understanding when we're going to step into our calling, we're constantly developing a new identity, and our calling is always evolving in same kind of deep knowing, but the version of it constantly evolves. So that's what we have to kind of understand too, right? Like, maybe you are really good and you've been staying in your zone of excellence, but you're like, okay, but now this version and this identity needs to evolve. So we ask ourselves on a daily basis, my new identity, again, the one that you know is you. You don't just make up an identity based on some person. Like, it has to be based on who you see yourself as, right? And that's what we talked about, listening to your own deeper truths. And then asking yourself, well, what decisions would that new identity make? And think about when you've already done that before. And that's the thing. All of these examples, I want you to think about how you've already done this before, so that you're gathering real data. Okie dokie. I think I said it all for today. There's so many things. If no one else was watching your goals, would you still do them? I think that's another good question to ask, right? Like, I know if nobody was watching me, I would still be working with my clients in the way I work with them. I don't have to, nobody else has to tell me that. And that's what I want you to ask yourself as you move and you evolve. Because sometimes we can go down these rabbit holes and get kind of bought into what we need to do or how we need to do it and all this stuff. And it's like, you kind of have to really ask yourself, you know, if nobody was watching, would I still do this? Right? And that's a good barometer, right? To know, okay, I really am stepping into my calling because I don't need anybody to tell me. Now, of course, as we evolve and as we grow, and we're trying to break our outer edge and our limits, we can have people support us, right? Okay, so I talked about that, getting people to help you in your vision. Oh, so many things we talked about. And I guess the last thing I would say is that see the data that's already exists. You know, if you have, and this is one of the things we try to figure out with our clients, like, what is your life altering transformation that you offer? Like, see how you've already done that. Like, don't try to try to find yourself outside of yourself. Yeah. So I hope these points were helpful in understanding what it takes to step into your calling, and understanding that calling is a calling that most likely is evolving. So what is your new calling? What is the new version of your calling right now? I want to hear you in the comments. And if you are interested in stepping into that, fully stepping into that, and having the spiritual healing tools and the strategy to get there, then DM me. Let me know, Jamie, I'm ready for a breakthrough yoga coaching call. And we will start that journey right away with what I call the 3-level clearing. We're going to clear what is it in your body, what's been imprinted into your body, what's been imprinted in your mind, and what's been imprinted energetically that unconsciously holds you back from moving forward. Because the resistance, sometimes you know where you want to go, but you don't understand what is the resistance. Why can't I keep on moving forward? There's one foot on the gas, one foot on the brake. Why? Because there are unconscious wounds that are there to protect you, and they're going to be in place until we actually look at them and we start to shift that imprint in you. That's step number 1. And then we work by grounding in the body, because we cannot function right in this world without having a stable body and nervous system. We learn how to clear the mind, right, so that we can hear our soul's voice. We learn how to process emotion, because all of this is like, it's a lot of emotion when we go towards our calling. There's a lot of old stuff that comes up, and fears, and all of these deep-rooted things that sometimes we don't even realize are there. So that's super important. We learn how to master our energy, so that we're like, no, don't do like XYZ. Put your energy there. And then we take the business strategy actions to move towards where you want to go. But the healing comes first. You know, because I can tell you tomorrow what you need to do to grow your business, to step into your calling, to do what you want, but you're not going to do it, because otherwise you would be doing it already, right? Same with me. Like, there's certain things, like, I knew I wanted to do it, but I knew I couldn't do it without help. So if you're feeling the call, right, to now step into the new version of yourself, and you know you need support, you know you need a sacred container, and you know, because that's the thing, we need accountability. I can't, whatever I'm doing right now, I'm not doing it on my own. I have a group of people helping me constantly, right? Because I can't do this in a vacuum, you know, especially when it's moving towards something you know you love, right? And it almost seems like really impossible. You kind of have to find the potential and possibility with other people. Yeah. So DM me, let me know, Jamie, I'm ready for a breakthrough yoga coaching call. And on that call, which is free, I'm going to send you an application. I'm going to read through it. I'm going to like, you know, we're going to look through, I'm going to see, ooh, what are the things holding you back? Because usually the resistance is unconscious. And then we're actually going to do the work. And that's going to be the domino effect to kind of liberate some energy to continue to move forward. And then we're going to stay in a container where you stay accountable, because, ooh, it's so easy to kind of figure something out and then just not do it, because you've never done that before. So Nobody's watching, so you don't do it. That's just human nature. I know this to be true for myself. That's why I always have coaches to help me, because there are certain things that I need to execute, and I like, honest to God, will not do it unless I have somebody helping me, and even just validating. Like, oh yeah, yeah, okay, good. That's a great decision. Go forth. Like, even just that. So if you want that sacred container where we're going to implement based on your strength, because your biggest asset is your ability to heal, to process emotion, to use your own medicine, and then very closely implement, because that's the thing, we have to implement very close. You can't go on this retreat and then come back and say, oh, I got to work on my business. Like, we gotta kind of have to work in congruence with the way we function. Otherwise, we get overwhelmed. We are feelers, right? We highly sensitive people are feelers. So we need to make sure that we're in a state where we can take action, and make sure that we are in a place where we can just make clear decisions based on just like the next obvious action for this week. Not for like, oh my God, the next, like, yes, we have to have the bird's eye view, but also like just today, you know? So that's it for me. I hope this stepping into your calling was helpful. Let me know if you have any questions. I want to hear your biggest takeaways. And again, you can DM me and let me know you're ready for a breakthrough yoga coaching call. Or also you can look at my link in the comments. Probably going to happen tomorrow, or my calendar link will be there. So thank you so much for your precious time. I believe in you, and have a beautiful day. See you next week. Bye, everyone.